Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship UES Horizon, watching the stars drift past through the main viewing screen. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for almost 200 years now. They were still considered newcomers by most alien species, small and insignificant compared to the ancient civilizations that ruled the galaxy. The Horizon was on patrol duty along the Outer Rim territories, far from Earth and the busy trade routes. It was quiet work, mostly checking on remote colonies and mapping new star systems. Jake liked the peace out here. His crew of 30 humans worked well together, and they had found a good rhythm over the past 2 years. Lieutenant Amy Chen sat at the communication station, monitoring the usual chatter between trading ships and colony bases. She was young but skilled, one of the best signal analysts in the human fleet. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she sorted through dozens of transmissions. "Captain," Amy called out suddenly, her voice tense. "I'm picking up something strange. It's not on any of the regular channels." Jake turned from the viewing screen. "What kind of strange?" "It's a distress call, sir, but it's broadcasting on every frequency at once. Whoever sent this really wants to be heard." First Officer Lisa Park looked up from her tactical display. She was Jake's second in command, a calm woman who never panicked even in dangerous situations. "Where's it coming from?" Amy checked her readings twice before answering. "The Kepler 442 system, sir. That's Zephyrian space." Jake knew about the Zephyrians. They were a peaceful species that looked like walking crystals, their bodies made of living silicon instead of carbon like humans. They had joined the Federation 50 years ago and mostly kept to themselves. They were known for their beautiful art and advanced healing techniques. "Put it through the main speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with a strange musical voice speaking in the Zephyrian language. Even through the alien words, Jake could hear the desperation and fear. Amy worked quickly to run the signal through the translation computers. "Sir, I've got a translation coming through now," she said. The musical voice was replaced by the flat tones of the computer translator, but the emotions still came through clearly. "This is Elder Council of Zephyros Prime. We broadcast this message to all civilized species in the galaxy. Our world is dying, our people are dying, we need help." The message continued, and Jake felt his stomach tighten as he listened. An artificial plague was killing the Zephyrians. Their enemies, the Vorthan Empire, had created a bioweapon designed specifically to attack silicon-based life. The virus was spreading across their homeworld, killing millions every day. "We offer everything we have," the translated voice pleaded. "Our technology, our art, our knowledge of the universe. We ask only for sanctuary for our children. 50 million souls. Cry out for salvation, please, someone answer, please help us." The message repeated, over and over, broadcast on every frequency the Zephyrians could reach. Jake stood silent for a moment, trying to process what he had heard. An entire species was being wiped out, and they were begging the galaxy for help. "Amy, are we getting any responses to this broadcast?" he asked. The young lieutenant worked at her station, scanning the communication networks. "Yes, sir, lots of traffic. The Federation Council is meeting in emergency session. All the major species are discussing it." "And what are they saying?" Amy's face grew dark as she listened to the intercepts. "The Ethereals say they maintain neutrality in all conflicts. The Chronari say it's not their problem. The Nexus Collective is running calculations and says the risk is too high." One by one, Amy reported the responses from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The ancient Ethereals, who had existed for millions of years, refused to get involved. The warrior Chronari said the Zephyrians should fight their own battles. The super-intelligent Nexus Collective ran their computers and decided helping wasn't worth the cost. Even the healing assembly of Altair, who were supposed to care about all life in the galaxy, sent their regrets. They said the Vorthan Empire was too strong, too dangerous to oppose. Jake watched his senior officers' faces as each rejection came through. Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez shook his head in disgust. Security Chief Ryan Davis clenched his fists. Medical Officer Dr. Kate Sullivan looked like she might cry. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "Earth Command is sending orders to all human ships. We're supposed to maintain our current positions and stay away from the Kepler system. Jake stared at the star charts displayed on the main screen. The Kepler system was marked in red now, a warning to stay away. While politicians and bureaucrats debated and calculated risks, an entire species was dying. He thought about the Zephyrian children mentioned in the broadcast. Kids who had done nothing wrong, whose only crime was being born into a universe where might made right. He thought about the Federation's high-minded ideals of justice and cooperation, which apparently only applied when it was convenient. "Sir?" Lisa asked. "What are your orders?" Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, humans who had joined the exploration service to make a difference in the galaxy. They had families back on Earth, careers to think about, futures to protect. But they also had consciences. "Amy, how long would it take us to reach the Kepler system?" "At maximum speed, about 18 hours, sir." "And how long do the Zephyrians have?" Dr. Sullivan checked the medical data that came with the distress call. Based on the plague's progression rate, maybe 3 or 4 days before their population drops below sustainable levels. Jake made his decision. It went against everything he had been taught about military discipline and following orders. It would probably end his career and maybe land him in prison. But some things were more important than careers. "Set course for Kepler 442, he ordered. "Maximum speed." The bridge fell silent. Lisa stared at him in shock. "Sir, Earth Command specifically ordered us to stay away." "I heard the order, Lisa. I'm choosing to ignore it." "Captain," Ben said slowly, "that's mutiny." Jake nodded. "Yes, it is. Anyone who wants to can record an official protest and distance themselves from this decision. I won't hold it against you." He waited, watching his crew. One by one, they turned back to their stations and began preparing the ship for the journey to Kepler 442. Nobody filed a protest. "Amy, send a message to Earth Command," Jake said. "Tell them the UES Horizon is responding to a humanitarian crisis. Tell them that when children are crying for help, somebody has to answer." The Horizon turned away from its patrol route and headed into the darkness toward a dying world, carrying 30 humans who had decided that doing right was more important than following orders. The UES Horizon raced through space toward the Kepler system, its engines pushed to maximum power. Captain Jake Morrison stood in his ready room, staring at the flood of messages coming in from Earth. Most were not friendly. Admiral Helen Wright's face filled the communication screen, her expression tight with anger and worry. "Captain Morrison, you are ordered to return to your patrol route immediately. What you're doing is not just insubordination, it's madness." Jake straightened his shoulders. "With respect, Admiral, I can't do that. There are 50 million people dying out there. There are also 12 Vorthan dreadnoughts protecting that system," Wright shot back. "You have one exploration ship with light weapons. This isn't heroic, Jake. This is suicide." The connection ended before Jake could respond. He knew the Admiral was right about the odds. The Vorthan Empire had the most powerful military in the galaxy. Their ships were built for war, designed to crush any opposition. The Horizon was built for exploration and science, with shields and weapons meant only for basic defense. But as Jake returned to the bridge, he found something unexpected. Amy Chen was receiving dozens of new transmissions, and her face showed amazement instead of fear. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said excitedly. "It's from the cargo hauler Lucky Strike." The voice of Captain Sarah Foster crackled through the speakers. She was a retired military officer who now ran supplies to the outer colonies. "Jake, this is Sarah. I heard what you're doing. My ship isn't much, but she's got a big cargo hold. I can carry refugees. I'm changing course to meet you at Kepler 442. Before Jake could respond, more messages poured in. The passenger liner Stardream converted to carry medical supplies. 3 mining ships from the asteroid belt, their crews volunteering to help evacuate civilians. A dozen retired military vessels, their captains calling themselves back to duty. Amy looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "Sir, it's not just a few ships, it's hundreds. Every human vessel within 3 days' travel is volunteering to join us." On Earth, President Marcus Webb faced the biggest political crisis of his career. The Federation Council was in emergency session, with the Vorthan ambassador demanding that humanity be punished for interfering in their military operations. Trade sanctions were threatened. Diplomatic relations hung by a thread. Webb stood before the Earth Senate, knowing his next words would change everything. "My fellow humans," he began, "we face a choice that will define us as a species. We can bow to political pressure and let innocent people die, or we can stand up for what we believe is right." The Senate chamber fell silent. Webb continued, "When children cry for help, adults respond. Earth stands with Captain Morrison and every human who chooses compassion over convenience." The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would not recall its ships, or apologize for trying to save lives. The news spread across human space like wildfire, and even more vessels joined the growing fleet heading toward Kepler 442. Engineer Danny Liu, commanding a converted freighter called the Heavy Lifter, organized the civilian evacuation ships. His vessel had been hauling grain to the outer colonies, but now its massive cargo holds were being fitted with temporary living quarters for refugees. "We're not warships," he told the other civilian captains over the communication network. "Our job is to get as many Zephyrians out as possible, while the military keeps the Vorthans busy." Meanwhile, the Vorthan Empire watched the approaching human fleet with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. General Vex Thorin commanded the blockade around the Zephyrian homeworld from his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. He had 12 massive dreadnoughts under his command, each one capable of destroying a dozen human ships. "Humans," he said to his officers with contempt, "an insignificant species that thinks they can play hero. We will crush them quickly and continue with the cleansing of this world." The Vorthans had good reason for confidence. Their dreadnoughts were kilometer-long giants, armed with plasma cannons that could crack a planet's crust. Their shields could withstand attacks from entire fleets. They had conquered dozens of worlds and destroyed any civilization that dared oppose them. But as the human fleet approached the edge of the Kepler system, something unexpected happened. The ships didn't come in the neat formations that military doctrine demanded. Instead, they spread out across space in a chaotic cloud, making it impossible to target them all at once. Commander Alex Rivera, leading the human military ships from the heavy cruiser UES Defiance, had studied every battle the Vorthans had ever fought. Their tactics were always the same: use overwhelming firepower to destroy the enemy's main fleet, then hunt down any survivors. "They expect us to fight like a traditional military," Rivera explained to his officers. "Big ships in neat lines, trading shots until one side breaks. But we're not a traditional military. Half our fleet is made up of civilian ships with civilian crews who don't know the rules." Rivera's plan was desperate but clever. The military ships would engage the Vorthan fleet directly, drawing their attention and keeping them busy. Meanwhile, the civilian vessels would use their smaller size and human-developed stealth technology to slip past the blockade and begin evacuating the Zephyrian population. Dr. Kate Sullivan, aboard one of the first ships to reach the planet's surface, found a world in agony. The beautiful crystal cities that the Zephyrians had built over thousands of years were dark and silent. Bodies lay in the streets, their crystalline forms cracked and fading as the artificial plague destroyed them from within. But there were survivors. In underground shelters and sealed buildings, millions of Zephyrians waited for rescue. The children were the hardest to see. Their natural crystal glow dim with sickness, but their eyes still bright with hope when they saw the human rescue teams. "Please," whispered Elder Ethan, one of the few remaining Zephyrian leaders. "Save our young ones. They are the future of our people." Above the planet, the battle began. The Vorthan dreadnoughts unleashed devastating volleys of plasma fire, and several human ships disappeared in brilliant explosions. But for every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The humans fought with a desperate courage that the Vorthans had never encountered before. Captain Morrison, still aboard the Horizon, coordinated the rescue effort while dodging enemy fire. His ship wasn't built for combat, but his crew worked miracles to keep it running. Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez rerouted power systems on the fly, keeping their shields operational even as Vorthan weapons pounded them. "Sir," Amy reported, "we've got civilian ships landing on the surface. They're starting the evacuation. Jake nodded grimly. The easy part was over. Now came the real test. How many lives could they save before the Vorthons overwhelmed them? The first transport ships began lifting off from the planet's surface, carrying thousands of Zephyrian refugees toward safety. But there were still millions, more waiting, and the Vorthon reinforcements were on their way. The battle raged above the dying world for 18 hours. Human ships fought with everything they had against the massive Vorthon dreadnoughts. The space around Kepler 442 became a graveyard of twisted metal and burning plasma, but somehow the human fleet held on. Lieutenant Sam Brown, the tactical officer aboard the UES Horizon, discovered something that saved many lives. The huge Vorthon ships were powerful but slow. They had trouble hitting smaller targets that moved quickly and unpredictably. "Captain," Sam called out excitedly, "I think I've figured out how to fight these things. If we make micro-jumps, short bursts with our faster-than-light drives, we can appear behind them before they can turn around." Jake Morrison nodded grimly. "Tell the fleet, every ship that can manage it." Soon, human vessels were blinking in and out of normal space like deadly fireflies. They would appear behind a Vorthon ship, fire everything they had, then vanish before the enemy could respond. It was dangerous and used enormous amounts of fuel, but it worked. Down on the planet's surface, Marine Colonel Tony Garcia led the ground evacuation teams. His soldiers moved through the crystal cities searching for survivors while wearing protective suits against the deadly plague. The sights they found would haunt them forever. "Over here," called Sergeant Linda Hayes, waving from the entrance, to an underground shelter. Inside, hundreds of Zephyrian families huddled together, their crystal bodies dim with sickness. The children were the worst to see, their natural glow almost gone. Dr. Kate Sullivan worked alongside the Zephyrian healers, who were still healthy enough to help. She shared everything human medicine knew about fighting diseases, hoping to slow down the artificial plague's effects. "Your immune systems are different from ours," she explained to crystal healer Nix, a young Zephyrian who had survived the initial outbreak. "But maybe we can adapt some of our treatments." The evacuation ships landed in the crystal cities one after another. Each ship could only carry a few thousand refugees at most, and there were still millions of Zephyrians alive on the planet. The math was terrifying. Engineer Ben Rodriguez, coordinating the rescue from orbit, watched the numbers on his screen with growing despair. "We're saving about 50,000 people every hour," he reported to Captain Morrison. "But the plague is killing them faster than we can evacuate them." The Vorthon reinforcements arrived like a thunderstorm. General Thorin's fleet had been 12 ships. Now 50 more dreadnoughts dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons all ready. Charging. The human fleet, already battered and running low on ammunition, faced total destruction. Captain Sarah Foster, commanding her converted cargo hauler, refused to give up. Her ship was loaded with Zephyrian refugees, including dozens of children, whose parents had already died from the plague. "I've got 800 souls aboard," she transmitted to the fleet. "I'm not letting them down now." All across the human fleet, similar decisions were being made. Captain Lucy Thompson had converted her luxury liner into a hospital ship, treating wounded Zephyrians with her small medical staff. Pilot Nick Carter led a squadron of mining ships, their industrial equipment adapted to cut through rubble and reach trapped survivors. But even courage had limits. The Vorthon reinforcements began systematically destroying the human vessels. The converted civilian ships, never meant for battle, exploded one after another under the withering enemy fire. Down on the surface, Elder Ethon made a decision that would echo through history. The ancient Zephyrian leader gathered the remaining elders in the planet's sacred temple, a massive crystal structure at the heart of their capital city. "Our people are leaving," he said, his voice like the ringing of distant bells. "But we who remain can still serve them one final time." Dr. Sullivan, working in a nearby medical station, felt the ground begin to vibrate. A deep humming sound filled the air, growing stronger by the minute. The crystal buildings around her started to glow with their own inner light. "What's happening?" she asked crystal healer Nix. The young Zephyrian's eyes were wide with amazement and grief. "The elders are awakening the planetary shield. It has protected our world for 10,000 years, but using it will cost them their lives. The shield had been built by the first Zephyrian civilization, a protective barrier powered by the life force of those who operated it. It had only been used twice before in their history, both times to stop natural disasters that threatened their entire world. Elder Ethan and his fellow elders placed their hands on the crystal control nodes. Their bodies began to glow brighter and brighter as they poured their remaining life energy into the ancient system. One by one, the elders sacrificed themselves to give their people a chance to escape. A dome of pure energy began to form around the planet. The Vorthan weapons fire struck the barrier and scattered harmlessly into space. For the first time in hours, the evacuation ships could work without being shot at. How long will it hold? Colonel Garcia asked as he led another group of refugees to the landing zone. Crystal healer Nyx was crying now, mourning the elders who had given their lives. Maybe 6 hours, maybe less. The barrier needs constant power, and there are not many left who know how to operate it. 6 hours. That was all the time they had left to save as many Zephyrians as possible. The human ships, both military and civilian, worked frantically to load refugees. Every available space was packed with crystal beings fleeing their dying world. Captain Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. All ships, this is our final evacuation run. Load everyone you can carry, then prepare to leave the system. We can't save them all. The words felt like poison in his mouth, but he knew they were true. The plague was spreading too fast, and even with the shield protecting them, they couldn't evacuate 50 million people in 6 hours. Dr. Sullivan, loading the last patients onto her medical transport, received an unexpected message from crystal healer Nyx. The young Zephyrian had decided to stay behind with the few remaining elders, helping to maintain the shield for as long as possible. "Tell your people," Nyx said, her crystal body already beginning to dim as she prepared to join the shield operation, "that the Zephyrians will never forget this day. You came when no one else would. You answered when we called for help." The evacuation ships began lifting off, carrying 47 million Zephyrian refugees to safety. It was not everyone, but it was enough to ensure their species would survive. Below them, the last of the elders continued to pour their life energy into the shield, buying precious time for their children to escape. As the human fleet prepared to leave the system, carrying their rescued passengers toward human space, the planetary shield began to flicker. The sacrifice of the elders was almost complete, and soon the Vorthans would be free to finish their terrible work. But they had failed in their primary goal. The Zephyrian people would live on, and the galaxy would never forget the day that humanity chose to answer a cry for help. The news of the Zephyrian rescue spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species in the Galactic Federation heard about humanity's impossible mission and its miraculous success. 47 million Zephyrians had been saved, transported, to safety in human space while their homeworld died behind them. Captain Jake Morrison stood in a Federation courthouse on the neutral world of Centauri Prime, facing charges of mutiny and violation of galactic law. The courtroom was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all watching to see what would happen to the human who had defied orders to save lives. The prosecutor was a Vorthan legal expert named Advocate Zex, his scaled face showing no emotion as he read the charges. Captain Morrison willfully disobeyed direct orders from his superiors. He endangered Federation relations with the Vorthan Empire. His actions destabilized the carefully maintained peace of our galaxy. But something strange was happening across the Federation. On Altair Prime, young healers marched in the streets carrying signs that said, "Shame on the Assembly," and "We should have helped." They were angry that their leaders had abandoned the Zephyrians when they could have made a difference. The Nexus. Collective, the superintelligent computer civilization, began running new calculations. Their machines had concluded that helping the Zephyrians was not profitable, but now they wondered if they had missed something important in their equations. Even among the ancient ethereals, voices of doubt began to emerge. For the first time, in thousands of years, some of their kind questioned whether pure neutrality was the same thing as wisdom. Admiral Helen Wright stood before the Federation Council, her face stern but her voice carrying unexpected pride. "Humanity will not apologize for choosing compassion over convenience," she declared. "We saw people dying and we acted. If that makes us criminals, then we accept that judgment." The Vorthan Empire was furious. Their ambassador, a massive creature, called Supreme Chancellor Vex, demanded severe punishment for humanity. "These upstart humans have interfered with legitimate Vorthan military operations," he growled. "They must be expelled from the Federation and their trade rights revoked." But the Vorthans had made a mistake. By demanding such harsh punishment, they revealed just how afraid they were of what humanity had done. Other species began to wonder what else the Vorthan Empire was hiding. In human space, the Zephyrian refugees were finding new homes on dozens of worlds. The integration was not always easy, but both species worked hard to make it succeed. Dr. Kate Sullivan established medical centers where human and Zephyrian healers shared their knowledge, creating new treatments that helped both species. Engineer Danny Liu worked with Zephyrian architects to design new cities that combined human technology with crystal growing techniques. The results were beautiful structures that seemed to grow from the ground like living things. Most importantly, the refugees were not just surviving, they were thriving. Crystal healer Nyx, who had survived the evacuation, became the unofficial leader of her people in exile. She worked closely with human diplomats to help her species adapt to their new lives. "Your people gave us more than rescue ships," she told Captain Morrison during one of his visits to the refugee colonies. "You gave us hope. You showed us that someone in this galaxy still cares about doing what is right." The trial continued for weeks, with species after species sending representatives to testify. Some supported humanity's actions, while others condemned them. The Federation seemed to be tearing itself apart over the question of whether saving lives was worth breaking rules. Then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Keth Va of the Healing Assembly requested a private meeting with Captain Morrison. The Alteran diplomat was old even by his species standards, his blue skin marked with the silver patterns that showed wisdom and experience. "Captain Morrison," he said quietly, "I bring word from 17 species who could not speak publicly at your trial. We voted in secret to support your actions, though we dare not say so openly." Morrison was surprised. "Why tell me this now?" "Because your species has reminded us of something we had forgotten," Kethva replied. "Before politics and profit clouded our judgment, we once stood for something greater. We were healers, protectors, guardians of the weak." The ambassador explained that many species were tired of living in fear of the Vorthan Empire. They had been bullied into silence for too long, watching as aggressive civilizations conquered and destroyed while they did nothing. "The Vorthans control too much trade, too much territory," Kethva continued. "They have made us afraid to act, afraid to speak out against injustice. But your humans showed us what courage looks like." Meanwhile, on the refugee worlds, something remarkable was happening. The young Zephyrians were not content to simply live in exile. Led by crystal healer Nyx, they began organizing themselves, planning for the day when they could reclaim their homeworld. "Humans showed us that sometimes one must stand alone to do what is right," Nyx told a gathering of refugee leaders. "Now we understand what courage means. We will not let our world remain in Vorthan hands forever." The Zephyrians began sharing their most closely guarded secrets with their human rescuers. Their crystal technology could create incredibly strong materials. Their healing techniques could cure diseases that human medicine could not touch. Their knowledge of energy manipulation opened new possibilities for both species. Commander Alex Rivera, now overseeing the integration program, was amazed by what they accomplished working together. "We're not just helping refugees anymore," he reported to Admiral Wright. "We're creating something entirely new." Back at the trial, the Federation Council faced an impossible decision. If they punished humanity severely, they would anger the 17 species that secretly supported the rescue. If they let humanity go free, they would face the wrath of the Vorthan Empire. The deadlock stretched on for months, with no clear resolution in sight. But while the politicians argued, Ordinary people across the galaxy were making their own choices. Young members of various species began emigrating to human space, seeking societies that valued compassion over convenience. The Federation recruitment centers on dozens of worlds reported the same trend. Their best and brightest were leaving, drawn to the Alliance worlds where they could work alongside humans and Zephyrians to build something better. President Marcus Webb, watching the developments from Earth, made a decision that would change galactic history. In a speech broadcast across human space, he announced humanity's choice. "We cannot remain part of an organization that considers genocide an acceptable outcome," he declared. "Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies withdraw from the Galactic Federation." The announcement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Humanity was leaving the Federation voluntarily, choosing principle over political convenience. It was a move that no one had expected, and its consequences would reshape the balance of power among the stars. Within hours of the announcement, Ambassador HFY requested an emergency meeting with human leadership. The message he brought would change everything once again. Ambassador HFY's emergency meeting with President Webb took place in the secure chambers beneath Earth's capital. The old Alteran diplomat brought news that would reshape the galaxy forever. "Mr. President," HFY said, his voice trembling with excitement, 17 species have voted to follow humanity's example. We are leaving the Federation too." The room fell silent. Admiral Wright, Captain Morrison, and the other human leaders stared at the alien ambassador in amazement. They had expected their withdrawal to isolate humanity, not trigger a mass exodus. "The Healing Assembly of Altair votes to join any alliance that humanity creates," HFY continued, "as do the peaceful Draknari, the scientific Kepler Union, and 14 other civilizations. We are tired of living in fear of the Vorthon Empire." Within days, the new Alliance of Free Worlds held its first meeting. Representatives from 19 species gathered on Luna Station, orbiting Earth's moon. The meeting hall buzzed with different languages and strange sounds as beings who had never worked together before tried to create something entirely new. Captain Morrison, cleared of all charges by the Alliance's first official act, was promoted to Admiral and given command of the new organization's defense force. His first ship was the AFS Beacon, formerly the UES Horizon, now serving as the flagship of hope for oppressed peoples everywhere. Crystal Healer Nyx stood beside Admiral Morrison as they watched the diverse fleet taking shape in Earth's orbit. Ships from 19 different species, each bringing their own technology and fighting styles. It was not the largest navy in the galaxy, but it represented something the Vorthon Empire had never faced before. Unity based on shared values instead of fear. "Admiral," Nyx said, her crystal voice filled with determination, "my people are ready to reclaim our homeworld. We have developed new weapons using combined human and Zephyrian technology. The Vorthons will not expect us to return so soon. The first major test of the Alliance came sooner than anyone expected. The mining colony of New Perth, populated mainly by human settlers, sent out a desperate distress call. A Vorthon fleet was approaching, demanding that the colonists surrender their world or face complete destruction. The old Federation Council met in emergency session, but could reach no decision. Half the remaining members wanted to negotiate with the Vorthons. The other half worried about provoking further aggression. As usual, they talked while people prepared to die. Admiral Morrison gathered his fleet commanders around the holographic display table aboard the AFS Beacon. The Alliance fleet was still small compared to the mighty Federation Navy, but every ship was crewed by volunteers who believed in their cause. "The Vorthons think they can pick off our colonies one by one," Morrison said. "They expect us to run, or hide like the Federation does. Let's show them they're wrong." The Battle of New Perth became legend across the galaxy. The Alliance fleet, outnumbered 3-1, used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Human ships provided speed and innovation. Alteran vessels brought powerful healing technology that could repair damaged ships during battle. Zephyrian crystal ships created energy shields that protected the entire fleet. But the most surprising, participants were the New Perth colonists themselves. Instead of evacuating, they stayed to fight for their homes. Miners used their industrial equipment to create makeshift weapons. Farmers turned their crop-dusting aircraft into attack fighters. Every person on the planet became part of the defense. The Vorthan commander, General Korax, had conquered dozens of worlds using the same brutal tactics. He expected the colonists to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, he found himself fighting an entire population that refused to give up. "What is wrong with these humans?" he demanded as his invasion forces met fierce resistance in every settlement. "Why do they not submit like civilized species?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kate Sullivan, now serving as the Alliance's chief medical officer, had been studying Vorthan psychology during her work with prisoners of war. She discovered something that changed everything. "Admiral," she reported excitedly, "the Vorthans are not as unified as they appear. Their empire is held together by fear and brutal punishment. Many of their subject species are looking for a chance to rebel." The intelligence proved accurate. As news of the Alliance's victory at New Perth spread, uprisings began on Vorthan-controlled worlds. Species that had been conquered and enslaved for generations suddenly saw hope for freedom. The Kepler Liberation, as historians would later call it, began 6 months after the Battle of New Perth. A combined human-Zephyrian fleet, supported by ships from 12 Alliance species, arrived at the Kepler 442 system to find it defended by only 3 Vorthan vessels. Crystal Healer Nyx, now serving as Admiral of the Zephyrian Reclamation Fleet, led the assault on her former homeworld. The planet's surface was still poisoned by the artificial plague, but Zephyrian scientists working with human researchers had developed a cure. "Today we return home," Nyx announced to her people as the first landing ships touched down on the crystal plains of Zephyros Prime. "Today we reclaim what was stolen from us." 5 years after the first desperate distress call, the Alliance of Free Worlds had grown to include 43 species. The old Federation, still paralyzed by fear and political infighting, controlled less than half the galaxy. Many of their younger generations emigrated to Alliance worlds, seeking freedom from the corruption and cowardice of their elders. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the AFS Liberator, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Beside him were representatives from dozens of species, all united by the simple belief that right mattered more than might. Lieutenant Amy Chen, now a commander, looked up from her communication station with a familiar expression. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from 3 systems. The Vorthan Empire is expanding again, attacking civilian targets." Morrison nodded without hesitation. The same decision that had started this journey 5 years ago remained just as simple. Set course for the nearest system. Alert all Alliance fleets. We have people to save. As the massive Alliance armada moved toward its next humanitarian mission, Morrison reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had started as one of the smallest and newest species in galactic civilization. Now they led an alliance that stood for everything the Federation had forgotten: courage, compassion, and the belief that every life had value. The galaxy had turned away when the Zephyrians called for help. Humanity had turned toward them. That single choice had reminded countless species what it truly meant to be civilized. The stars ahead held new challenges and new calls for help, but Admiral Morrison and the Alliance of Free Worlds would answer them all, just as they had answered that first desperate plea from a dying world. Because when someone cries for help, you respond. It was that simple and that important.